Hey there, you're welcome to this week's Tech Tuesdays webinar on Advanced Taskflow for Data Integration. I'm Brinda, your host for today's webinar. Today we have Prakash Jain, Senior Subject Matter Expert from the Informatica Global Customer Support team with us for this session. He has over 10 years of experience and expertise in CAI module of IICS. Before we start this webinar, here are some housekeeping tips. This webinar is for 1 hour, including the Q&A that is meant for 15 minutes. You can post your queries in the Q&A box. Dial-in participants are muted for this webinar. The session is being recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success portal. The recording will be emailed to you as well. You can put in your feedbacks and suggestions for the session in the post-webinar survey. The Tech Tuesdays webinar program is hosted within the Success portal. The Informatica Success portal is a micro-learning platform offering free and unlimited learning to all registered users. This feature-rich platform was launched to help you learn and use Informatica products better. Here are a few important links that you can go over later that will help you in your product adoption journey. Over to you, Prakash. Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction, Vrinda. In today's Tech Tuesday webinar, we will discuss on orchestrating data integration tasks using Taskflow. The agenda of today's Tech Tuesday webinar would be Introduction to Taskflow, different steps in the Taskflow for data integration task, Taskflow templates that are readily available to be used within IICS, Taskflow properties, parameter in Taskflow and how to pass them, different ways to run Taskflow, demo followed by Q&A. Taskflow helps you to control the execution sequence of a data integration task. There are two kinds of Taskflow, a linear Taskflow and a Taskflow. A linear Taskflow helps you to run data integration tasks only in sequential manner. This is helpful when your use case is straightforward, just to run your data integration task sequentially on a schedule. If you have a requirement to orchestrate your data integration task such that it can be invoked as an API and perform complex business logic, then Taskflow would be most suitable one. In today's session, our focus area of discussion will be Taskflow. You can run data integration tasks in parallel, use advanced data making criteria, time task, and perform other advanced orchestration using Taskflow. One example use case would be you may want to run two mapping tasks in sequence, however run the second task only if first one fails and after 2 hours. In this case, you can create a Taskflow to orchestrate this scenario. Another scenario would be that you may want to retry your data integration task few times if they fail due to some network glitch or other issue. In this case, you can use a Taskflow for performing this retry attempts before notifying the end user if they still fail. Prerequisite: advanced Taskflow feature must be enabled in the org. You cannot create a mapping task or synchronization task during the Taskflow creation. You must have this already available before creating a Taskflow. Taskflow steps. There are several steps that are available within a Taskflow. Let's go one by one. Assignment step. Assignment step is similar to assigning a value to a variable in programming language. The assignment step in Taskflow helps you to set a value for a field. A field is a data holder that carries data around a task flow. You can use input fields and temporary fields to set a value for a field. Input fields provide input for your task flow, which mainly comes from the external world when you're calling the task flow as an API. The task flow uses temporary fields internally to handle data. Next is data task. Data task step is used to add a mapping task, synchronization task, or power center task to a task flow. You can configure how the task flow handle errors and warnings, perform action based on a schedule, and override runtime parameters. Notification task. Notification task is used to send an email notification to specified recipient. You can configure the notification task step to send an email notification. For example, you can send an email notification to inform recipient about the number of success rows, error rows that were encountered in a data integration task of a task flow. You can also use other variables, perform some kind of HTML content and send as an email notification to the recipient. Next is command task. Use a command task to run a shell script or a batch command from a file on a secure agent machine. For example, you can use a command task to move a file, copy a file, zip or unzip a file, or run clean script or SQL script as part of a task flow. You can use task flow output like status, exit code, etc. to orchestrate subsequent tasks in a task flow. Next is file watch task. Usually you may have a requirement to trigger a task flow based on event. One such event is a file watch task. Use a file watch task step to listen to file in a defined location and monitor file events. In the file watch task step, you can select an existing file listener with the connector source. You can use file event to orchestrate task flow execution. For example, you can wait for a file to arrive at a particular location and then consume the file in a subsequent step. You have a lot of configuration with respect to file listener, like the poll interval, whether the file should arrive, get deleted or updated, etc. Next is ingestion task. Use an ingestion task to leverage a file ingestion task for a task flow orchestration. Select an existing file integration task. You might want to perform data integration operations after moving file to an intermediate location and before transferring the files to the target. In this case, you can use ingestion task step in conjunction with data integration step. Next is subtask flow. Subtask flow is similar to function in programming language. You may want to break your complex task flow into smaller chunks for easy readability and modularity. In this case, use task flow. Task flow steps help you to embed and reuse an existing task flow. You can configure input fields to provide input when you run a task flow. You can also enable fault handling to determine the reason for a task flow failure. Next is data decision. This is similar to if-else or switch statement, which help you to perform selection control mechanism in programming language. Use a data decision when you want a task flow to run different path based on a value of a specified field. Next is parallel paths. Use a parallel path step when you want a task flow to run multiple items at the same time. For example, you may have a need to run 3 mapping integration tasks simultaneously. The task flow runs all the items in parallel step and then moves to the next step only once all of them in parallel is completed. Next is jump step. Jump step is similar to go-to statement in programming to pass the control to a particular statement in a code. The jump step in a task flow helps you to jump from one part of the task flow to another. Next is end step. Use the end step to define the HTTP status code that must be used when a task flow completes. This gives a logical closure to each and every path of a task flow and sets the completion of a task flow. Next is wait step. Wait step is similar to sleep within a programming construct or a script which pauses the execution for a specific duration. The duration can be set in seconds, minutes and hours, etc. Next is throw step. Throw step forces a fault to occur and sets the task flow status to failed based on your criteria. You may set appropriate fault code, fault reason and details. We have discussed different steps. Let them see them in action in IICS Designer. We will add different steps in a task flow and review task flow step properties of each of the steps. You can give whatever name that you like. This is the default name. And let us select a mapping configuration task. I have no input specified. However, in your case, if you have any input or a note parameter, those can be set here. Once the task executes, it gives these fields as an output. That is run ID, log ID, task ID, status of a task flow, number of rows processed, etc. etc. You can use this field information to orchestrate subsequent task flow based on the value of these fields. We also have timers in the data task. This helps to run anything based on a schedule. That is, it will be invoked after specific interval of time of the task flow. However, whatever value that you set, if a data task completes before this value, then this timer would not execute. There are two types of timer. One is interrupting, another one is non-interrupting. So when you add interrupting event, it will interrupt the normal flow and take the interrupted path. Let us add a timer. In our use case, we might have a scenario wherein a data task may go in a run state, and you would want to notify if it does not get completed even after 5 hours. It also has error handling. In other words, you can catch the error and perform a specific operation. On warning or on error, you can either ignore, suspend the task flow so that a human can review the suspended task flow and retrigger if need be, or you can also have custom error handling. In our demo, let's use custom error handling. So it gives you two different paths when you select a custom error handling. One is a happy path, which is nothing but if the data task succeeds. The second one is a failure path. Let us add notification whenever a data task fails. A notification step, as we discussed earlier, helps you to send an email at this point in time. We may have different features like trigger a process or a webhook in the later point in time. So you can specify email address, CC, your subject, email content, or email body. You can use either HTML or a plain text content. For the purpose of this demo, let's quickly give email address. And we will edit the body. The data task failed with the reason as fault reason. You can use these fields to get the value and use it in the data task, in the notification task. Now let's use another assignment to mark the status as in progress, just for the purpose of the demo. Let us add command task. So I have created a script which moves file from one directory to another. We will invoke that command as a command task. So these are the input variables that you need to provide for the command task. Runtime environment, where your script reside, your script name. In my case, the script name is movefile.sh. You can use either a batch script or a shell script or any script that can be run from a command prompt. Pass any input parameter and a working directory. Since I do not have any input parameter, I have left it as blank. Next, I would like to use a data decision. and I would like to use the status of a previous task flow. So this data decision will take a different path based on the task status. Let me use assignment step in each of these different paths. I would like to perform error handling, perform data decision, and perform some assignment step in the fault path, and also through an error. I would like to jump, once the data decision complete, I would like to jump to assignment 5. Let's validate. Let's select the runtime environment as agent group. Let's set some value in this assignment step. Let us, as we know, the throw step is to throw an error in the execution flow. This will help you to forcefully fault a task flow and throw appropriate error. In our case, let us hardcode the error code, error detail, and error reason for this fault step. Error detail, the task flow failed. Error reason, bad data. Set the status as failed task flow. Just to quickly summarize, what we have done is we have used assignment step and assigned some dummy value as a status to be started. We have invoked a MCT task and we have added a timer event to notify or to help us understand if the data task is stuck, hung for whatsoever reason. And if the data task fails, a recipient will receive an email with the details of the error reason. We then have few assignment steps under command task, which will run a script on my secure agent machine and move the file from started to in progress. Then we have few assignment steps to set appropriate status and jump back to assignment 5 and forcefully fault a process using a throw step. Now that we have seen different steps in task flow, let's look at different task flow templates available within IICS. Task flow templates are readily available within IICS Designer to accelerate your development needs. These are the few different templates available within IICS. Taskflow Basic. Use this template when you need a basic canvas with a start step and an end step. You can add other steps at any point on the canvas on using any of the Taskflow templates. Parallel task steps. Use parallel task template if your major requirement is to run 2 or more data integration tasks in parallel. You start with a task flow that contains start step, a parallel path step, and an end step. Parallel task with a data decision. Use parallel paths with data decision template if your major requirement is to run two or more data integration tasks in parallel and then make a data decision based on the outcome of any task. You start with a task flow that contains a start step, a parallel path step, a data decision step, and end step. Sequential tasks template. Use sequential tasks template if your major requirement is to run two data integration tasks one after another. You start with task flow that contains a start step, two data task steps, and an end step. Sequential task with data decision. Use sequential task with data decision template if your major requirement is to run two data integration tasks sequentially and then make a data decision based on the output of either task. You start with a task flow that contains a start step, two data integration tasks, and a data decision and an end step. Single task template if your major requirement is to run one data integration task on a daily or a weekly schedule. For example, you can start a task flow that contains a start step, a data integration step, and an end step. Task flow properties. Task flow binding. So we have a lot of task flow properties that helps you to configure your task flow. The one is task flow binding. Task flow binding helps you to tell how your task flow will be initiated. The probable values are rest, soap, or event. If you select rest and soap binding type, you can run the task flow by using a rest or a soap endpoint. You can use the allowed groups and the allowed use field to define the user or a group who can run a published task flow as an API. Event. If you select the event binding type, the task flow is invoked when the specific event occurs. For example, a task flow can be invoked upon an event such as arrival of a file or a deletion of a file. The event stored name field is available where you can select the file listener that you created for the event. Task flow access. If your task flow uses a REST or SOAP binding type, you can define user group and user who can run a published task flow as an API in the allowed groups and the allowed users field. Input and temporary fields. Input fields are used to pass a value to the beginning of the task flow when the task flow is invoked as an API. When you select the binding type as a task flow as event and select a file listener, data integration creates an input field to store details of the files that arrived, were updated, or were deleted as part of the file listener event. Temporary fields. Create temporary field to use a task for use in a task flow step. A task flow uses temporary field internally. Temporary fields do not appear in the input or output of a task flow. Advanced properties. You can configure a task flow to suspend on fault that occurs at the task flow level. You can also configure the task flow to send an email notification to specified recipient when it is suspended on fault. Now that we have seen a few of the task flow properties, let's have them look in the IICS designer. For the purpose of the demo, I have created two task flow, demo task flow and sample task flow. Let us review some of the properties of this. The property of task flow are configured in the start step. The general tab has name and API name. API name come into play when the task flow is being invoked as a REST or SOAP endpoint. Start step. Start step define binding. This says how your task flow will be invoked. Either it could be REST SOAP or event. When you configure REST or SOAP as a binding type, you should always provide allowed users or allowed groups. Otherwise, you will not be able to see the endpoint URL for the task flow. Input fields. You can create and configure input fields so that the values can be passed when you call a task flow as an API. Temporary fields. The temporary fields can be created if you want to hold some values within the task flow to do some kind of calculations. Advanced. Advanced tabs enables you to enable suspend on fault and send email on suspension. So you can configure suspend on fault so that your task flow will be going to suspended state, and an end user can review the task flow run and resume the task flow by taking corrective action. Now let's look at the sample task flow. The sample task flow has similar properties apart from one different property, which is binding. This particular task flow runs on an event, which is a file listener task. So I have created a file listener capability or an event connection which will poll a particular directory, which is home espani, and it will wait for any files in this particular folder. So whenever a file arrives, it will take the file and initiate a task flow. You can see it is configured to poll every 15 seconds.
You may have a need to create a mapping task and run the same using different parameters like source or target connection, source or target object. In this case, you can create a mapping with input parameters or node parameter and start passing this value from a task flow. An input parameter is a placeholder for a value or a values in a mapping. You can define the value of the parameter when you configure the mapping task. You can use Taskflow again to override these subset of mapping input parameters. That is, you can pass source object, source connection, target connection, and target object. The node parameter is a placeholder for a value that you can pass in or out of a mapping. Unlike inode parameters, an inode parameter can change each time a task runs. You can use Taskflow to override any type of inode parameter that a mapping task supports. Expression editor. The expression editor helps you to create XPath XQuery expression to be performed on a field value. XQuery is similar to what SQL is for database. That is, to query element or attributes, etc., you can use XQuery XPath expression. You can also use them to construct XML and do much more like parsing those. You may use fields, function, and operator to create expression. The right-hand side picture shows the expression editor, which helps you to create your own expression. You can use fields which are available on the left-hand side of a picture. That is, all the input fields, temporary fields, or fields from data task. You can use functions which are readily available or which are available in W3 links. You can use operators as shown, or also you can configure the operators manually by typing them. You can write your for loop, if statement, etc., or also add comments in your XQuery expression code. Expression editor, the XQuery version 3.0 to create expression in the expression editor. Details are in the w3.org link as provided. You may use tools like Basics or online XQuery runners to validate your XQuery code. Use validation panel to understand if there are any errors with the expression. You can also use functions available in the expression editor panel to build your own XQuery expression. We'll see a demo on running few sample XQuery expression using a tool called Basics.
I have installed Basics 9.4.2 version to run few of my sample XQuery code which we usually use in IICS. So in my first example, I am interested in getting all the employees along with the tag name from the sample hard-coded XML data. My XML data is Office, which has 3 employees, Adam, Bert, and Chris, with different departments, and I'm interested in getting all the employee names. In this case, I'm using XPath, traversing to XML data, and then employee and name, which will give me all the 3 different names along with the tag name. So let me quickly run this in order to show the response results. So if you can see, I got all the 3 names of the employee. Let's go to the next example. In my next example, I am interested in getting all the names of an employee, but however, I do not want the tag names along with the employee name. In this case, I am going to use data function in order to pass the employee name and get only the name value of a tag, which is in my case Bertha and Chris. Let's go ahead and run this particular xquery expression. So as you can see, we got just the names of the employee. Let us go and check on the next xquery expression. In this expression, we are interested in retrieving attributes of an XML. Here we have an XML which has office and employees within the office and has an attribute called as ID. We are more interested in getting all the IDs of an employee, in which case we will use @ symbol to specify that it is an attribute in conjunction with data function, as we need only the value of an attribute. Let's go ahead and run this particular xquery expression. So we can see the results are 1, 2, 3 as a department ID, or sorry, rather employee ID. Now let's go to 4th example. In this example, we are showing how you can use a for loop and also if else in conjunction with the for loop. Here we are traversing to each employee, and if the employee is a male, then we are appropriately adding the salutation based on the gender of the employee. Here we have 3 employees and we are adding Mr. and Mrs. in each of the employee based on the gender. So let's go ahead and run this particular XML xquery expression. You can see that we've added Mrs. to Adam, Mr. to Adam, and Mrs. to Nancy, and Mr. to Chris. Let's move on to the next sample. In this sample, we are interested in fetching all the unique departments of the employee. We have 6 employees and 4 unique departments. So now let's use the function distinct-values gives you the unique value of a particular array. Here we are passing employee IDs and using this function as to get the distinct values. Let's go ahead and run this particular function to see the results. You can see that we have got all the unique departments of the running a task flow. There are many ways to run a task flow. One of the ways to run a task flow is by using Taskflow Designer and clicking on Run button next to on the upper right corner of a task flow. This is a way of running a task flow by using UI. The other ways of running a task flow would be calling via API, wherein you can use an service URL which is REST or SOAP and invoke the service URL from clients like Postman, SOAP UI, and invoke the task flow by passing appropriate user credential. One of the other ways to run a task flow is you can configure file listener event, wherein a task flow would run based on arrival of a file. In this case, you have to define appropriate binding type as event and select appropriate file listener connection. When you publish the task flow subscribes to a connector file event that is defined in it. A schedule. You can also run a task flow on a schedule, create a schedule in administrator and associate the task flow with the schedule. As we discussed, you can also run a task flow as an API. Let's look at some of the common information when you invoke a task flow as an API. To run a task flow as an API, you must first publish the task flow as a service. When you publish a task flow, data integration generates the service URL and the SOAP service URL. You can use this endpoint URLs to run the task flow as an API. You can dynamically provide input parameters for the task flow contains and perform orchestration. You received a run ID as a response of a request that you make to the task flow. You can use this run ID to perform another endpoint URL to know what is the status of the task flow. The service URL uses the following format, that is IICS URL followed by active-beeple followed by RT followed by API name of the task flow. The SOAP service URL uses the following format, that is IICS service URL active-beeple followed by SOAP and then the API name. As we discussed earlier, one of the usual use cases is to run failed data integration tasks. Let us build this logic together in Taskflow. A prerequisite for the purpose of this demo would be to create a mapping task which fails all the time and use that in a task flow. Log into IICS and create a task flow. Click on New, Task Flow and select the basic template. Let us name the task flow as Retry Task Flow. Add a user or allowed roles in case you want to invoke this as an API. Let us add a user admin 021-651, which is present in this org. We do not need any input. Let us create an counter variable for tracking the number of retry attempts within the task flow. Now that we have set the properties, let's add assignment step to initialize the counter variable. Let's assign the counter variable to 0. Now let us add a data integration task step to invoke the mapping task. In our case, we will select mapping task builder. We do not plan to have any input assigned to this data integration task. Let us perform our custom error handling so that we can catch the fault in case a data integration faults and then perform retry logic. Now let us add the data decision as an exit criteria so that we can come out of the retry logic after several attempts. Here, let us add assignment step to increment the counter every time we make a retry. Use formula and say counter equal to counter plus 1. And use a jump step to jump back to data integration invocation. Here, select a counter variable to get out of the loop if we attempt for 3 times and still encounter error. Let us send a notification if we exhausted all the retry count and forcefully failed the task using a throw step. Let us set appropriate fault code, fault detail, and reason. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to hard code the fault code, fault reason, and fault reason. Let us save and publish the task flow. Let us validate once. Jump this to our data task step. Save. Publish a task flow. And run the task flow. Click on My Jobs to look the run status of the job. Let us refresh the screen to look at the updated status, and we see that the task flow is failed. And we will also see error code and the and the reason which is secure agent is down as part of the failure. Let us look at the number of attempts. If you see, it has called the task flow 5 times. That is, once it called and it invoked, made a retry of 4 times. So this concludes the demo of the retry logic. Debugging a task flow. You may click on My Jobs to see all the running task flow by a logged in user. If you're interested to see all the task flow, all the data tasks, you can go to Monitor app to see them. Clicking on View Subtask List of all the data displays list of all data integration tasks invoked from task flow. You may view processed row, start time, end time, status, etc. for each of the data tasks. You may go to Monitor app to see all the run of the task flow in the organization. Upon opening a task flow, it would display a graphical representation of a task flow with path it has taken, a logic that it has performed, and status of each of the data task step. One can click on Advanced View to view Beeple view of a task flow with variable information. The task flow process logs can be downloaded by clicking on glass icon in the Outline tab. Just click on Download Entire Log to your computer to give a textual representation of the process log. The variable section holds all the variable value used by the task flow. Few variables are created for internal use. The log tab in the advanced view shows the status of each Beeple step with timestamp. This comes in handy if you're dealing with performance related issues to see what is the time it has taken to initiate, to complete the particular step. The screen also shows any error while executing the task flow. Let us look at the task flow, which is retry task flow that we invoked recently. If you click on the retry task flow, it will show you a graphical representation of the failed task flow, which says it started, it completed the assignment step, it had a fault in the data task step, and took a data decision and performed some retry logic, and then finally sent a notification and the task flow got faulted. So you can see all the information related to error, etc. at the bottom of the screen. You could also see the variable information if you pass any, here in the input field and in the output field. The advanced view, as we discussed, shows a bevel view of a task flow process. Here you will see a variable information, few of the internal variables, a class icon view which will allow you to download the log file. It is also gives you a tab called as logs tab, which you can use to filter based on fault, data change, data rewind point, etc. Each of these beeple steps give you a timestamp on when it started, whether it is executing or it got completed. So this comes in handy when you want to do a complex troubleshooting and understand where exactly your task flow is failed. References. These are the few online document reference and knowledge base article reference that you can go through on more information on task flow. If you have questions, you can post it to the network community for data integration. If you have any question, let's discuss now and have it answered. Thank you.
Please post your questions in the Q&A box and we'll try and answer them. So Prakash, we have one question from Vamshi. What is the best approach to avoid running a task flow same time via REST multiple times?
Hey, thanks, Vamshi, for these questions. So at this point in time, we do not restrict any users to invoke multiple task flow at the same time because it is being invoked as REST and SOAP. One of the ways would be to create some kind of a log file on invocation of a task flow and use that log file to understand whether currently any task flow is running and then take appropriate decision step to kind of gracefully end the task flow or continue with the task flow.
Thank you. We have another question from Kimberly. When invoke Taskflow as REST or API, you state you need to give the allowed user or groups. Can this also be done or managed in the IICS API manager?
Yes, you have. Currently, we support basic auth for Taskflow, and currently we do not have an capability to use this URL in the IICS API manager. But yes, I think we will have this. We might have this in future, but currently it's not.
Thank you, Prakash. So we have another question. Do we have any case study available to convert Power Center mappings to Informatica Cloud Taskflow?
Sonaka, this is something not specific to Taskflow. I would not have an answer. It is more on PC to cloud conversion utility that we have. So I think that would answer your question. So currently, I mean, within Taskflow, you cannot convert it, but there is a separate utility that is available that is taken care by another team in the Informatica.
Sure. We have another question. Does data integration support dynamic mapping, like reading multiple sources with different structures, like Informatica developer tool data service does?
If you talk about mapping task in data integration, you can parameterize your input and so on, which will help you to read from different multiple sources. So that should help you to configure multiple input sources.
Thank you, Prakash. Another question. If I have several parallel data tasks which are each set to suspend the task flow on warning, if a data task ends with a warning, will the other data task complete processing?
No, so if a data task goes in a warning, if it goes to a warning state, and if you set it to suspend, then it will stop the execution there. It will not move forward. So end user or a operations team or your administrator, whoever is trying to maintain, he will be able to review them and resume the processing from that point onwards.
Okay, thank you.
After taking corrective
Another
action.
question? Sure. Another question, is there any way to attach a file to notification task body?
No, we do not have that as of today. But yeah, that is something probably product teams can consider based on the number of use cases that we get on this area.
Sure. Next question from Gunashekar. Can you please arrange the meeting for application integration process creation and its advanced property?
If you want to take it, it's something ask for similar meetings.
We can do that. We can note that. Sure, we'll get back to you on
So
that.
we will take it forward. I think the appropriate teams will be able to prioritize application integration process creation and its advanced properties.
Sure. Yes, we can do that. And next question, can we invoke scripts from a different server using command task? For example, invoking MDM batch group.
Yes, you can invoke the script provided there is a secure agent installed on that particular, where you want to invoke. As long as we have the secure agent, then you can select the agent in the command task and then use that to invoke script in that particular server. So the requirement is you need to have a secure agent so that it can invoke and get the status.
Okay, thank you. Another question. If the task flow is designed to retry for a few times in case of failure, the logs will be separate for all the attempts. Will all the attempts be considered as different instances?
So there will be one log file for the data task, which you can see and understand what all time it has taken and what all path and how many attempts it has taken. So there'll be one file for task flows. But those will be independent data tasks, however, because we are invoking the data integration task at the end of the day. So the thing is, there'll be one log file for task flow, but underneath it, you will see multiple subtasks being invoked.
Okay. Next question. If the task flow will be scheduled in IICS at a given time, what binding needs to be specified?
Yeah, so if you're using Taskflow to schedule it, you need to use REST and SOAP and do not provide any user credential or allowed group, right? In that case, this will be invoked only as a schedule, and no one will be able to invoke it as an API. And if you want both as a schedule and API, you can also specify user group and allowed users so that you can invoke both as a schedule as well as an API.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How do you make a task flow fail instead of suspend?
So we have a step called a throw step, which you can use to fail a task flow instead of suspend. So you can catch a fault wherever you are expecting the task flow to fail, and in the failure catch all path, you can provide throw step so that it will always fail, and you do not enable suspend on fault. So add a throw step, do not enable suspend and fault. That will have the task flow in the faulted state.
Thank you, Prakash. Next question. It seems that the decision task only take pretty simple conditions and only takes one condition per path. am I misunderstanding, or can you make this more complex?
Yes, you can have complex decisions. One of the ways, if you want to keep it clean, is you can use an assignment step to do your complex processing and assign the values to particular variables, and then use those variables in the data decision to take appropriate, condition. So complex conditions can be performed in assignment step for the easy readability, and those values, the variables that you have assigned at the end of the day, can be used in the data decision step.
Okay, thank you, Prakash. We have another question. Can we prioritize a job to avoid a queue? Is there a queue priority for jobs?
That is again data integration functionality. That is something will be taken up based on number of use cases that we will see in this area.
Okay. Let's wait for some more time. You can post your questions in the Q&A box and we'll try and answer them. The recording for the session will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success portal. Also, you can put in your feedbacks and suggestions in the upcoming survey that follows this webinar.
I think it's a freeware, but there are many online xQuery runners which are available if you Google them. I usually use the basics to run pretty quickly, wherein I can just give my XML or xQuery, even store them, or you can put your XML in the databases, which is binded within the basics tool itself. So I usually use basics in order to quickly run some code. It could be as large as hundreds of lines of code, or it could be as simple as 5 lines of code. So I use basics, which is very, very, very stable, very good. I think it is freeware, but yeah, just feel free to have a look. One question from Pawan. Is there a demo on running a Taskflow using REST API? I think we already have one. Otherwise, we will be able to create a simple demo for that and post it to our network portal or our support channel. There should already be there. We can send you across the demo link. Pawan. Sure, we will send you across the demo link. Probably, Vrinda, will be able to get the email address of Pawan?
Sure. We'll be able to retrieve that. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
We have another question, Prakash. Is there any way you could debug using breakpoints?
Well, not at this point in time. It's not in a way that you can use it easily, but yeah, we might have this in future. But it's not available in a way that it can be used easily as of today.
Yeah. Looks like we have answered most of the questions, Prakash. If we have failed to answer any of the questions, we'll get back to you after this webinar. Thank you for joining. I hope everyone is safe, have started this year in a good note. Thank you. See you on our next Tech Tuesdays. And thank you for the session, Prakash. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks. And Pawan, I have shared you the link for the Taskflow demo as running as an API.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone, and thanks Linda.
Thanks everyone.
For arranging this
Thank
session.
you. Bye.